And if you take inflation into consideration, starting pay for a lot of jobs is down as much as 40% as what it was in the year 2000. U.S. job openings hit record 9.2 million, but businesses can't find enough workers to fill them. I've actually never in my life, and I'm older than a lot of you guys, seen as many now hiring signs as in my life as I've seen right now. Look at this. However, there is a big shift in salaries and pay too. So at some point, an issue gets forced whether a company likes it or not. In this case, that's what we're seeing right now. I'm seeing fucking McDonald's. I mean, I was in Central Florida. I'm talking about in fucking country, and their McDonald's were like starting at $11 an hour. Now, I ended up having, I had not a crisis, but I had a very tough stretch of my life that I went through in my 20s. And there was a point where I had been successful in other things in my life, and I had to go back to work at a Burger King. Okay, I humbled and started over, and went and worked at a Burger King. And I was making $7.28 an hour. The jump from $7.28 to $11 starting an hour is huge. I mean, that's a 50% increase. But let me put it to you this way: it's a game of time. It's all about time. The world runs by time. Okay, you have demand for the product from the business and a decrease in workforce. Okay?
Welcome,
you've got the world returning and wanting to buy things, and the business is the demand for their product increases, but their employment is decreasing or flatlining. They now need to keep up with this demand. They have two choices because they know that unemployment benefits are going to run out at some point. The question becomes, because originally it was supposed to run out here.
My life forever.
Okay, but the goalpost kept getting moved. So now the business has to decide how long they are willing to lose out on profit or return or sustainability to try and hold out for this to end, and where workers are forced to come back. And because the goalposts kept getting pushed, they weren't able to last any longer, right? Even large operating chains like McDonald's and Chipotle and Wendy's, all those, they got to a point where, because here's the thing, think about it this way. You're willing to lose $1 billion in revenue over a 6-month period by not having a people to work, and be able to not have to, and I'm not saying this is right, I'm just saying from a corporate understanding, and not have to raise salaries, which means over the course of 10 years, you would lose 10 billion, right? So you're willing to lose $1 billion now to save 10 billion down the road because you don't want to have to pay more, right? I'm just throwing numbers out there. This is just theoretically speaking. But they're getting to a point where they're going to lose so much value now, so much in sales now, and potentially hurt their business, having to shut down franchises and take more debt on, where this is becoming clouded. And now there's competition. So what they're doing is they're raising, by necessity, they're forced, which is great, I guess, is forced to raise their starting pay. Now, it's about damn time, because if you think about minimum wage, and I know there's an argument there about minimum wage and free markets and stuff like that, but minimum wage has basically stayed the same for 20 years, 10 years, while expenses have gone up 30% in that same time frame. So wait a second, you're telling me people are making the same, but the cost of living is 30% more. So by them raising the minimum wage, well, not minimum wage, but the starting pay at McDonald's or whatever to $11 per hour, they're just now bringing it in line with where it's supposed to be. However, don't start celebrating quite yet, because this is what they're doing to entice people to come back into the workforce now. But if unemployment benefits end and people are forced to come back into the workforce because they're not getting benefits anymore, you think they're going to keep it at $11 per hour? Nah, fuck that. Nah, this is to get people in now, but once there's an overwhelming demand for jobs, they're going to drop that shit right back to $8 or $9 per hour. They'll keep it higher than it was before, but they're going to drop it down because they want to get those workers in now. And the reason that I say this, okay, the reason that I say this is there was a study that went out recently that said for every 1% increase in unemployment, there is a 7% decrease in starting pay for people entering the workforce. And if you take inflation into consideration, starting pay for a lot of jobs is down as much as 40% as what it was in the year 2000. And the reason is there's more people vying for the same amount of jobs. So if you're an employer, okay, and you're looking to hire an IT specialist, right, and you're offering $70,000 per year starting out, and you have 3 applicants, right, you've got to up the stakes to get, away from competition, away from other businesses, and bring the cream of the crop. But if you have 10 people now, you know that out of 3, you might have 1 qualified, you might have 3 qualified. If you have 3 people going for the same job, the desperation's there, you lower it to 60,000, you may not have 10, but you're still going to have 6 candidates. You're still going to be able to fill the job and save the money. And that's how corporations look at it. So there's a lot going on here. And as people start moving back into the workforce, we will see this start to happen. High schoolers don't want to work for minimum wage anymore. They just want a Mr. Beast. I mean, there's an argument there, and I'm not going to get political, but there is an argument there of, should the government force corporations to enforce this? Is there an overreach? Does the government, if they give a minimum wage, can they force a private company to pay people more? At which point it's no longer a private company because then it is now being controlled by the government. And is there a slippery slope? I get all that. So there is a conversation out there. And then the other side of the conversation is, well, a government's job is to protect its people and make sure that they can survive. And they have to force these companies to give them a minimum wage or a living wage, because if they don't, then people starve. And then the government has failed its citizens and they pay taxes. I get that there's lots of different arguments there. I'm just giving you guys understanding from the financial aspect of it and where that works as far as a monetary flow. A UBI, from a financial standpoint, here's the issue with a UBI. The problem with UBI for all is money, supply, and demand. Okay? If everybody gets UBI and they all get an equal amount, and without sounding political of, well, it doesn't incentivize workers, let's forget about the actual work. Let's talk about the value of money. The value of everything in the world is supply and demand. Okay? Is somebody willing to buy it? How much are they willing to pay for it? And what determines the availability of it? The less demand, the less supply, the more demand, the general idea that the increase of value goes up. The issue is, if everybody has money and there is an infinite supply, the question becomes, is that money taxed? And if it's taxed, it goes back to the government. But there's no economic growth because there's nothing being produced. Unless it's all robots. Are we talking about an AI takeover? Come on, man, try harder. You're asking, no, you know what it is? You're trying to bait me into a political debate, and I am not here to do a political debate, okay? If you subscribe to modern money theory, then there is no such thing as debt, okay? There is no such thing as debt. It is literally just, we decide how much money is there. Can you explain all schools of economic thought? There are several schools of economic thought, but what I would say is that I think that everybody has to look at it. It has to be looked at subjectively in different ways. One thing to look at, the value of money is, you can't bring back the gold standard, right? You can't bring back the gold standard, because the idea was, it's always, whenever somebody wants you to subscribe to their specific belief system, whether it's politics, whether it's monetary, whether it's religion, they dumb it down, they make it in an analogy you can understand, and they make it seem very simple when it's not. The idea is the government should be like a house. Budget yourself. If you make $50,000 a year, you shouldn't spend more than $50,000 a year. Matter of fact, you should put some away. And they used to say, imagine making $50,000 a year and spending $300,000 a year. And that sounds good. And so with the gold standard, the idea is that your dollar is backed by a commodity. In this case, it would be gold. All right, so your dollar is backed by gold. You can only print as many dollars as you have in gold. Well, nowadays, with the way things move, the value of gold can be inflated. Commodities are traded on a global scale. Back in the day, it wasn't on a global scale. It's on a global scale now, so the value of gold goes away. But the problem with this is you don't allow for growth. Now, the idea behind gold standard is great. You only have as much money as you have a backing of money. And that sounds good if you talk about it in a simple, well, treat it like a household budget. But the problem is then you don't have growth. Okay? Bring it back to the house, for example. You make $50,000 a year. But you get a job offer in the next town over. But you need to drive to that job. That job's going to pay you $75,000 a year. But you need to drive to that job, but you don't have a car. And you're already spending the money you have. So you don't have any money for a car. Well, guess what? You will stay making this forever because you can't do anything else. But if you're allowed to take a car loan from the bank, you now went $10,000 in debt. You borrowed $10,000, but it allows you to buy a $10,000 car or truck that allows you to travel to the next city over to now make $75,000. And that is a growth. And now because you've made that money, you now pay off the truck. You have money left over. Okay? And you can, I don't know, make an addition to your home. And now the value of your home went up. Now your net worth has gone up. And so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. So that's the idea. When people say, well, Stocky, we keep printing money and bailing out all these businesses, it just puts us further and further in debt. It's okay as long as that money goes towards future growth. If a business opens up, you open up a business and you take a $300,000 loan, well, guess what? That's debt. And if the government gives somebody $300,000 debt on a PPP loan, whatever, that's debt. But if you open that business and now you hire 3 people who now all make money and pay taxes, the government is now getting a return on that money, but more importantly, your business, if let's say it's a restaurant, you now spend money to the local market. And you have to hire a mechanic. And you have to, you hire the local cleaning company for after hours. So now you're creating jobs and money is flowing from consumers through your business to your employees, which goes back to the government, through your suppliers, who then also spend money, and that's how it grows. So that $300,000 debt that is taken on could lead to $1.5 million in what we call growth in a couple years. So that right there is why inflation is not terrible always. Everybody thinks, oh my God, inflation, our money's gonna be worthless. Not necessarily. As long as growth and it goes in line with inflation, then it's fine. The problem becomes employment and income. That is where the kicker is. That's the stick in the tire spoke. If growth and inflation stay step in step, then there's no problem. You can go up 5% a year in inflation if you're getting 5% growth, right? Because you're keeping in line. There's growth. That inflation is leading to growth. But when employment and income stay stagnant, that's when you get the problem. Because that money is always going to the top. And it's not coming to the bottom. And the problem is that people at the top have one problem that every human has, and that's called greed. They don't think about the long term, they think about the short term because they think the problem is going to be their kids or grandkids have to deal with or somebody else will deal with it. The problem is that they focus so much on this money flowing to the top and not increasing the bottom line that eventually it gets to a point where these people can no longer sustain these people, and that's when the system collapses. That's what happened in Rome. That's what happened in England, in Spain, in France. That's what happens. It's not the inflation that kills. It's the gap between the haves and have-nots that continues to grow, and the amount on the bottom continues to grow until these people can no longer sustain from what's down here, and then either these people uprise and take them down, or the system collapses on top of itself.